The knock on my office door was light, almost polite. I glanced up from my screen, expecting one of the junior analysts. Instead, Daniel Whitaker, the CEO's 29-year-old son, strode in like he owned the place. Technically, as of this morning, he nearly did. "I'm your new boss," he said before I could stand. "And we're done here." The words hung in the air between us, absurd in their casual cruelty. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He smiled, a smug, rehearsed little smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You've been great, Olivia. Really. My dad speaks highly of you. But things are changing around here. New leadership, new direction. You're not part of that." No explanation, no warning, no gratitude for the 3 years I had mentored him. Personally guided him through product strategy, investor relations, even the company culture he now claimed to want to reshape. "I see," I said quietly, pushing my chair back and standing. He looked momentarily thrown by my calm. "You don't have to pack up right now," he offered like a condescending afterthought. "HR will arrange a formal offboarding." "I'll take care of it myself," I said. "Is your father aware of this decision?" Daniel's expression hardened. He's stepping back. "This is my company now." He turned and walked out without another word. For 10 seconds, I stood in silence. Then I sat back down, my heart beating calmly. Not out of shock, but out of clarity. I had known this moment was coming, just not like this. 3 months ago, I overheard a late-night call Daniel had taken outside the conference room during a strategy offsite. I wasn't meant to hear it, but I did. "Once I'm in, I want her out," he'd said, voice sharp with frustration. "She's the only one who could connect the dots, and she's too damn good at it." Back then, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. I'd mentored Daniel out of loyalty to his father, James Whitaker, the CEO who had built Whitaker and Brandt Technologies into a mid-market powerhouse. James had trusted me with everything from launching our flagship product to leading acquisitions. When he'd asked me to take Daniel under my wing, I had agreed. Out of respect. Out of hope. Now I realized the truth. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, I opened my personal Gmail on my phone and tapped out a single sentence. "It's done. Folder goes active in 3 weeks." The reply came within minutes. "Understood." Countdown begins. The rest of that day passed in a blur of polite goodbyes, fake smiles, and carefully measured exits. HR handed me a severance agreement that included a non-disparagement clause and a general release. I signed it without hesitation. I had nothing to say. Not yet. But I had plenty to show. What Daniel didn't know, what he had arrogantly assumed I'd never suspect, was that his private folder on our shared company server wasn't as private as he thought. The file path was poorly hidden behind renamed subfolders in the internal sandbox. He'd used it to save everything. Confidential call transcripts, unapproved budget changes, even drafts of his emails to board members trashing his father's decisions. And then there were the documents about Project Altura, a shell company acquisition Daniel had authorized while his father was out on medical leave. Hidden transactions, payments routed through an offshore entity, and falsified valuation reports. I had quietly mirrored the entire folder to a private cloud. Every file was time-stamped and archived. I never altered a thing, just watched and waited. On my way out that evening, I passed James's office. The door was closed, the nameplate still intact. He had no idea his son had just gutted the one person keeping the floor beneath him from caving in. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the digital folder. 3 years of mentorship, 3 years of trust, 3 years of watching Daniel copy my strategies and pass them off as his own. Now, he was about to learn the most important leadership lesson of all. Don't burn the bridge that's holding your reputation together. The next morning, I was at my kitchen table by 6 a.m., a fresh cup of coffee steaming beside my laptop. I hadn't slept much, but I wasn't tired. If anything, I was laser-focused. My instincts had been humming since the moment Daniel stepped into my office and said, "We're done here." He had no idea that by doing that, he'd activated a plan I had designed over a year ago. A plan I'd quietly labeled the Black Folder Protocol. It started with one simple rule I learned early in my career: always document everything. I'd seen enough colleagues, brilliant, loyal people, pushed out of companies they'd helped build. It always came down to one thing: proof. And I had proof. In spades. I opened the mirrored backup of Daniel's hidden server folder and began sorting it into categories. There were files with internal discussions about repositioning leadership, clearly referencing his father. Documents labeled W&B Strategic Succession Timeline, with my name listed as a legacy block to innovation. Legacy block. That one stung, not because it was insulting, but because it was so transparent. He wanted me gone because I knew too much. About the business, about his weaknesses, and about the choices he'd made behind closed doors. Then came the good part. Files tied to Project Altura. On paper, it looked like an innocent acquisition. But the documents told another story. Inflated revenue reports from the target company, side payments to offshore consultants, and fake due diligence sign-offs with digital signatures I knew had never been authorized. It was bold, reckless, and illegal. By 9 a.m., I had compiled the core of what would become my board briefing: a clean chronological presentation backed by screenshots, metadata, and internal email trails. But I wasn't ready to send it yet. Timing was everything. I called Eleanor Marks, a corporate attorney I'd worked with years ago when we faced a whistleblower case on the other side. She had once said something that stayed with me. Exposing truth is one thing. Doing it with precision is power. She answered on the second ring. Olivia? I'm activating the folder, I said. There was a brief pause, then a sharp intake of breath. You're sure? Daniel made it easy. I want this airtight. Send everything encrypted. I'll review and advise. But if what's in that folder is half as bad as you hinted, the board will call an emergency meeting within 48 hours. That afternoon, while Daniel played CEO for the cameras, holding an all-hands Zoom to share his vision for a leaner, faster W&B, I was in Eleanor's private office downtown, going through the documentation with her and her associate. She paused at a wire transfer confirmation. This one. Here. This could be classified as fraudulent misrepresentation if the board never approved it. They didn't, I said. I was still vice president of strategy then. I would have known. Then he's not just cleaning house, he's covering his tracks. She looked up at me. You understand that if we proceed with this, he won't just be fired. He'll be investigated. I nodded. This isn't about revenge. It's about protecting the company his father built, and the employees who still believe in it. Because underneath the betrayal, the lies, and the arrogance, what still drove me was loyalty. To James. To the teams I helped grow. To the mission we once had before Daniel turned it into a vanity project. Eleanor sat back and exhaled. You've done this brilliantly, Olivia. Quiet, legal, bulletproof. I didn't want to burn the place down, I said softly. But if it's already on fire, I'm not going down with it. By Friday morning, Eleanor had sent a summary dossier to the board's lead independent director with the subject line: urgent, governance and fiduciary risk, immediate review required. By Friday evening, I received a call from Teresa Connolly, chair of the audit committee. We'd spoken only in passing over the years, polite, distant, formal. But her voice on the phone was different now, sharpened. Olivia, thank you for bringing this to us, she said. We'll need a full closed session review early next week. Please make yourself available Monday morning. Of course. And Olivia? Yes? This is bigger than we thought. As I hung up, I looked out the window at the city skyline. For 3 years, I'd poured myself into mentoring someone who only saw me as an obstacle. I'd given him playbooks, frameworks, my time, believing foolishly that he might grow into something real. But instead, he had mistaken mentorship for weakness, respect for naivety. And now he was about to face what happened when experience fights back. With evidence. Monday would be interesting. Not for me. for him. Monday morning arrived, cold and gray, the kind of sky that felt like it had paused its breath just for the drama ahead. I dressed deliberately. A navy suit with subtle pinstripes, sharp heels, and a watch James had gifted me after we closed the Redwood merger 4 years ago. "You kept the deal alive when it should have flatlined," he had said. "That's what real leadership looks like." I hadn't worn it since. Today felt like the right day to put it back on. At precisely 8:45 a.m., I entered the boardroom of Whitaker and Brandt Technologies. It was a space I knew well. Sleek, all glass and chrome with panoramic views of the skyline. But I had never sat at the table for a closed executive session. Until now. 12 board members were present, along with legal counsel and a forensic auditor Eleanor had arranged to attend. There were no cameras, no assistants, just serious faces and the low murmur of early morning tension. Daniel wasn't there. Yet. "Olivia," said Teresa Connolly, nodding from the head of the table. "Thank you for coming. We've reviewed the summary dossier and confirmed its authenticity. What we need now is the full picture." I nodded. "I brought everything." A tech support member wheeled in a secure laptop. I connected to a private drive and pulled up a slide deck titled W&B Internal Compliance Report, Project Altura and Executive Risk Exposure. The first slide wasn't numbers. It was a timeline. The day I started mentoring Daniel. The day James went on medical leave. The day Daniel took over operations. And the day he fired me. The dates told a story before I even opened my mouth. Over the next 45 minutes, I walked them through it. The off-the-books payments, the falsified revenue forecasts, the buried communications to board members using private email servers. Each slide was annotated with metadata, file hashes, and cross-reference signatures. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I simply presented. And with each click, the silence in the room grew heavier. By the time I got to the wire transfer documentation, the one routed through the Shell Corporation in the Caymans, I saw 3 board members exchange glances. Eleanor, seated to my left, said quietly, "We believe this transaction alone could represent a breach of fiduciary duty and SEC compliance." "Not to mention fraud," added the auditor grimly. Someone exhaled slowly across the table. "Good Lord." Teresa leaned forward. "Do you believe James was aware of any of this?" "No," I replied without hesitation. James trusted his son. He thought the company was in capable hands while he recovered. "And you? Why didn't you come forward earlier?" I met her eyes. Because I thought I could protect the company quietly. Because I thought Daniel would grow into the role. And because I was waiting for confirmation of what I suspected. I didn't want to act on instinct. I wanted proof. And now that you have it, I'm not asking for anything, I said calmly. I've moved on. But this company, James's company, deserves better than what Daniel has done in his name. At 10:07 a.m., the door opened. Daniel walked in with the confident swagger of someone who still believed the board meeting was about quarterly planning. He stopped short when he saw me. "What is she doing here?" Teresa didn't flinch. "Please sit down, Daniel." He obeyed, though not without a visible scowl. "We've been reviewing documentation," another board member began, "pertaining to Project Altura and certain financial and compliance activities undertaken during your tenure." Daniel shot a glare at me. "This is ridiculous. She's bitter. You fire someone and suddenly—" "I didn't come here to accuse you," I interrupted, my voice level. "I came here with evidence. The files are independently verified and were retrieved from your personal directory on the internal sandbox server. Your metadata, your logins, your drafts." I didn't authorize any of that," he stammered. Eleanor leaned in. "Then who did?" Daniel looked around, suddenly less certain. The confidence was draining from his face like color from a photo. "Look," he said, shifting in his seat. "Maybe a few things were misinterpreted. But Olivia is twisting this. She's always been against—" "You said I was done here," I replied quietly. So I left. But I didn't twist anything. I just showed them the truth. Teresa stood, her face unreadable. Daniel, we'll be going into executive session. Please wait outside. He hesitated. That wasn't a request, she added. As the door closed behind him, a weight settled into the room. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Daniel would be placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The board would contact James directly to inform him of the situation. Legal counsel would initiate internal review procedures and prepare for external inquiries. As I stood to leave, Teresa extended her hand. You may have just saved this company. I shook it. I just told the truth. And as I stepped out into the hallway, I passed Daniel sitting stiffly on a bench. He didn't look up. His jaw hadn't dropped yet. But it would. By Tuesday morning, the silence was over. It started with a headline in an industry newsletter: Internal Audit Sparks Emergency Leadership Shakeup at W&B Technologies. No names, no details, just enough to stir curiosity and concern. By noon, 2 more outlets picked it up, adding that the board had suspended senior leadership pending a compliance investigation. The phrasing was careful, but the damage was already taking shape. By 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in months, James Whitaker. I stepped out of the cafe where I'd been reviewing client onboarding docs for a new consulting contract. My heart beat just a little faster. Olivia, he said, his voice low but steady. I just heard. I didn't ask how much he knew. I'm sorry it had to be this way. I should have seen it, he said after a pause. The signs were there. You tried to help him. I did. Another pause. Then, thank you. That single sentence held years of trust, regret, and something more vulnerable. Acknowledgement. Not just for what I had done, but for everything leading up to it. By Wednesday, the board had released a formal statement. Daniel Whitaker was under investigation for a pattern of financial inconsistencies and governance violations. James was returning from medical leave temporarily to stabilize executive operations and ensure continuity during the audit process. The markets didn't wait. W&B's stock dropped 14%. The company that had always been a picture of reliable, measured growth now looked volatile and uncertain. I watched it all unfold quietly from my apartment, fielding messages from former colleagues and reporters alike. I responded to none. But one message stood out. It came from Kristen Liu, W&B's Director of Engineering, and one of the few people who'd seen me as more than just a senior suit. They're cleaning house. Everyone's shaken, but we're grateful. You did what nobody else could. You stood up. P.S. You should have been CEO. Thursday afternoon, my consulting phone rang with a blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Olivia Jennings? A voice asked. Yes. This is Amanda Griggs from Bain & March Executive Search. We represent several firms in the tech and fintech space, and your name has come up in, well, quite a few conversations this week. I blinked. I'm not looking for anything right now. Of course, but we'd love to talk. Several board chairs have expressed interest in your leadership style. Quiet strength with a scalpel, they're calling it. Quiet strength with a scalpel. I wasn't sure if I liked the metaphor, but I understood it. That evening, my email chimed with a message from Teresa Connolly. Subject: Interim Strategy Council. Olivia, the board has asked me to reach out and formally request your involvement in the Strategic Recovery Task Force. We're assembling a small, trusted group to advise James during the next phase of stabilization. You would have full autonomy and authority to help restructure leadership and internal processes. Let me know if you're open to a conversation. I stared at the message for a long moment. It wasn't a job offer. It was something more complex, a chance to rebuild what had been broken, to shape the future of a company I had once believed in. But it also came with weight, and the ghost of a betrayal still fresh. Still, I replied, let's talk. The next morning, James called again. I know I can't undo what Daniel did, he said, but I'd like you to be part of what comes next. You still trust me? Always did, he said. I just didn't realize how much I needed to. That afternoon, I returned to W&B's headquarters, not as an employee, not as an exile, but as a strategist, a counselor, a quiet storm returning to the eye of chaos. As I walked past reception, a few employees looked up, surprised. Some smiled. One even mouthed, "Thank you." I wasn't looking for applause. I was looking for alignment. Between values and vision. Between ethics and execution. In the strategy meeting, James sat at the head of the table, but all eyes shifted to me when I spoke. I outlined a roadmap. Stronger compliance, a revamped hiring pipeline, and a rotating mentorship program for women in tech leadership. Let's make sure no one ever gets shut out of the room they helped build, I said. James nodded. Exactly what we need. For the first time in years, I wasn't just heard. I was valued. The hardest part of rebuilding a company isn't fixing broken systems. It's repairing broken trust. The kind that seeps into every hallway, every team meeting, every email chain with a suspicious, just circling back tone. At Whitaker and Brandt Technologies, trust had become currency, and it was in short supply. When I stepped into my first strategy roundtable as part of the interim recovery team, I felt it immediately. The tension was subtle but unmistakable. Department heads who used to greet each other warmly now sat with arms folded. People were choosing their words with surgical caution, unsure who they could rely on. James opened the meeting with a few remarks and then turned it over to me. Every eye followed. I stood, hands lightly resting on the table. Let's talk about what's next, I began. Not just in terms of policy or profit, but in rebuilding something that actually works. For everyone. There was a long pause. Then Kristen Liu, Director of Engineering, spoke up. I'll start. We've lost good people. My senior architect quit last week. Said he didn't want to work for a company that hides what's broken. And he's not alone, added someone from HR. We've received 13 formal resignations since the news broke. Exactly, I said. That's why this isn't just a PR cleanup. This is cultural reconstruction. Over the next 2 weeks, I led daily sessions with department leaders, not to hand down orders, but to listen. I met with teams who had felt invisible under Daniel's leadership, with employees who had stopped offering ideas after watching them get dismissed or stolen. I asked hard questions. What do you need to trust this company again? What does accountability actually look like? And they answered, candidly. Stop promoting people who know how to network instead of those who know how to lead. Create a feedback loop that doesn't end in a black hole. Recognize contributions out loud. Don't wait until someone quits to admit they mattered. The honesty was raw, and it lit a fire in me. Meanwhile, James began speaking more openly with employees, admitting where things had gone wrong and asking for their help in writing a new chapter. His vulnerability was unexpected, but powerful. I watched people respond not to titles, but to transparency. At the same time, Daniel's absence remained the elephant in every room. The internal investigation was ongoing, but rumors were swirling. SEC involvement, potential charges, board lawsuits. Every conversation felt like it could pivot at any moment into chaos. And yet, people were starting to believe again. Not in the company, not yet, but in the possibility of change. One afternoon, I found myself standing in the break room where Daniel and I used to meet weekly for mentorship catch-ups. He'd always been so polite then, so eager. If someone had told me back then that he'd one day fire me without warning, I'd have laughed. But betrayal never shouts when it walks through the door. It whispers, smiles, waits for the right moment to strike. Kristen entered holding a cup of tea. We're glad you're back, Olivia, she said, leaning against the counter. You've changed the temperature of the whole place. I don't want to just change the temperature, I replied. I want to rebuild the foundation. She nodded. We believe you can. That was the moment I knew. We were turning a corner. In week 3, we launched the first major initiative, the Transparent Recognition Program, a platform where contributions could be logged, verified, and publicly acknowledged across departments. It wasn't revolutionary, but it sent a message. We see you now. We also created a cross-functional innovation council, inviting junior and mid-level employees, not just directors, to sit at the table and shape new initiatives. You're really democratizing the place, James said during one of our late evening debriefs. It's long overdue, I replied. Innovation dies in echo chambers. He looked at me for a moment. I wish I'd given you this authority sooner. I smiled faintly. You're giving it now. That's what matters. But not everyone was thrilled with the shift. A few senior managers, loyal to the old way, began resisting the changes, subtly undermining initiatives or forgetting to include new council members in key meetings. That's when I made a decision. I called a full department head meeting. No agenda. Just one sentence on the invite. Let's talk about who we want to be. I opened the meeting with no presentation, no metrics, just words. W&B isn't in crisis because we failed to deliver a product, I said. We're here because we failed to protect the people behind it. Leadership isn't just about guidance. It's about guardianship, of ideas, of integrity, of each other. The room went still. From now on, we rise together, or we don't rise at all. By the end of the week, the resistance had quieted. Not because they were silenced, but because they saw which direction the wind was finally blowing. Toward fairness, toward transparency, toward the kind of leadership that couldn't be erased with one power-hungry sentence. 3 weeks after the emergency board session, the investigation was complete. I was reviewing quarterly planning drafts when my phone buzzed. A message from Eleanor, short and sharp. The board just voted. Daniel is out. Formal announcement drops at 10. I stared at the screen, letting the weight of it sink in. Daniel Whitaker, once the golden boy of Whitaker and Brandt Technologies, once the heir apparent, once my protege, was officially done. The internal findings had confirmed everything. Fraudulent authorization of the Project Altura acquisition, misrepresentation of financials, and breach of fiduciary duty. It didn't take the SEC long to open a preliminary inquiry after that. But for me, this wasn't about headlines or humiliation. It was about closure. The company released its official statement at 10:04 a.m. After a comprehensive review of executive conduct and corporate governance practices, the board has unanimously voted to terminate Daniel Whitaker's employment effective immediately. We thank Olivia Jennings for her vital contributions to the ongoing transformation of W&B and reaffirm our commitment to integrity, innovation, and leadership transparency. His name and mine, side by side. But this time, the credit was right where it belonged. That afternoon, I sat with James in his office, just the two of us, no assistants, no PR advisors. You were right, he said. Looking out the window, the skyline reflected in the glass like a fading illusion. About everything. I should have never handed over the keys before he was ready. I didn't respond. I knew he wasn't looking for reassurance. He was mourning more than a business loss. He was mourning the person he'd hoped his son would become. Do you think he meant to destroy it? He asked quietly. No, I replied. But he wanted power more than he wanted purpose. And that's always the beginning of the end. At the next board meeting, they offered me a permanent seat at the table. Not just as a consultant, not just as a thank you. A real vote. A real voice. I took a breath and declined. I didn't come back to join the board, I said. I came back to finish the job. Then what is the next step? Teresa asked. I'm starting something new. 2 months later, I launched the Athena Group, a leadership advisory firm dedicated to promoting ethics-first innovation, mentorship for women in tech, and crisis recovery for companies on the edge of collapse. We weren't about branding spin or damage control. We were about truth, resilience, transformation from the inside out. And we were busy, very busy. Because in a post-Daniel world, everyone wanted to make sure they never ended up with a Daniel of their own. Meanwhile, Whitaker and Brandt stabilized. Slowly, steadily. The innovation council we built turned into a permanent division. Employee retention improved. Internal surveys showed trust levels rising by 48% in the first quarter after the leadership change. People had stopped whispering in hallways. They had started believing again. I hadn't seen Daniel since the boardroom, but I did receive one final message from him. A short, clipped email with no greeting. You could have handled it differently. I sat with those words for a while. Then I typed back, so could you. Then I hit delete. He didn't deserve the last word. The following spring, I was invited to deliver the keynote at the Women in Executive Leadership Summit. My talk was titled, The Power of Documentation and the Strength of Quiet Voices. The audience included rising leaders, CEOs, HR execs, and a few former W&B employees who had since gone on to start companies of their own. As I stepped up to the podium, I saw Kristen Liu in the front row nodding at me. A full circle moment. They say betrayal changes you, I began. And that's true. But integrity shapes you. What you do when no one's watching, that's who you are. And when you're pushed aside, underestimated, or erased, that's when you choose who you'll become next. The applause was long and loud. And as I walked off the stage, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. 1 year to the day after Daniel walked into my office and said, "We're done here." I stood in the corner suite of the Athena group, sunlight spilling across a whiteboard full of ideas and a team full of people who got it. I raised a mug, gifted by my assistant, with gold lettering that read, "Legacy greater than ego." I smiled, thinking about the folder, the meeting, the moment it all turned. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about building something better because they couldn't, and making sure you never have to be in their shadow again.